Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're opening a file that sits right on it's right on the razor's edge of what feels comfortable. We're looking at session 235 of the early sessions, book 5 of the Seth Material.
Recorded deep in the winter of 1966, February 23rd, to be exact.
Right. And before we get into the metaphysics, and trust me, we are going to get into some very strange, slightly chilling metaphysics today, I want to set the scene for you.
Yeah, context really matters with these sessions.
Exactly.
Okay.
Because we aren't in a temple, you know? We aren't on a mountaintop. We're in Elmira, New York. It's February. It's freezing outside. Jane Roberts, the medium, and her husband, Rob Butts, are just sitting in their living room.
And they've actually just come back from a short vacation. They took a few days off to reset, catch their breath. They even skipped the previous Monday session.
Which, as we'll see, turns out to be a really crucial detail for the psychic experiments later on. But right now, the vibe is just refreshed. Seth, the entity Jane channels, comes through with this massive surge of energy.
He really does.
But what strikes me about this specific session, and the reason we chose it for this deep dive, is the whiplash.
Oh, whiplash is the perfect word for it.
We oscillate between this high-level, almost architectural cosmic philosophy. We're talking the nature of reality, probable universes, the ego, and then, without warning, we crash land into a psychic experiment involving a beer coaster.
A beer coaster and a guy named Hack Rice doing a drunken dance.
Yes, it's wild. But before we jump into the deep end, we need to make sure you know the ground rules for the show. This deep dive is distributed free of charge on all major platforms for educational purposes.
And we are drawing all of our insights today directly from the Seth Material, which is published by the New Awareness Network.
If you find yourself thinking, wow, I need to read this for myself, and honestly, you really should, because we can only cover so much here, we highly encourage you to visit the New Awareness Network website and bookstore. You can find them at sethcenter.com/early sessions.
Go get the books. It's really the only way to get the full unfiltered picture.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Seth starts the session by welcoming them back from their break, but then he pivots immediately. He doesn't ask how their vacation was. He goes straight to the topic of dreams.
Right.
And he drops a bombshell right out of the gate.
Yeah.
He basically tells them, you think you're dreaming. You're actually traveling.
Yeah, he completely challenges the conventional view of dreams. You know, the idea that they're just mental garbage processing or random neuron firings. He tells them to look specifically at the weird stuff.
The weird stuff.
The elements of dreams that don't match your physical life. He says, and I'll quote this directly, look for dream individuals with whom you are not acquainted in your waking life. Look for landscapes that appear bizarre or alien.
Because usually we brush those off. Right?
Oh, totally.
We wake up and say, wow, that was a weird dream. I was on a purple planet with a guy who had 3 heads, and then we just forget it. We treat it as nonsense.
Exactly. But Seth says, quote, for all of these exist somewhere. That is the key word, somewhere. He's introducing the concept of probable universe systems.
Hold on. So when I dream of a bizarre landscape, I'm not just hallucinating it. I'm perceiving a totally different reality.
Precisely. Seth states that these places do not exist in the space we know are physical coordinates, but that doesn't make them non-existent. He calls them objective and concrete within their own field of reality.
Man, that is a heavy concept. It implies that what we call reality is just the channel we happen to be tuned into right now.
That's a really great analogy. Think of your waking ego as a radio receiver locked onto 98.5 FM.
Right.
That's physical reality. That's Elmira, New York. That's your office. When you sleep, you drift between stations. Just because you aren't hearing 101.9 FM while you're awake doesn't mean the music isn't playing there.
But if these are real places, why do dreams feel so chaotic? I mean, dream logic is, well, it's illogical. You're in a house, then suddenly you're on a boat, then you're talking to your 3rd grade teacher. If it's a real place, shouldn't have continuity.
This is where we have to re-educate ourselves on what order actually means. Seth addresses this head-on. He says the confusion comes from our ego. The ego is trained to perceive order through continuity of moments.
Time.
Exactly, time. First A, then B, then C, cause and effect.
I walk through the door, therefore I am in the room.
Right. But in these probable systems, the order isn't based on time. It's based on subjective association.
Okay, we need to stop and really break that down. Subjective association.
Yeah.
Because to a modern ear, the word subjective usually means fake or imaginary. Like, oh, that's just your subjective opinion.
Which is a huge linguistic trap we fall into. We think objective equals real rock and subjective equals imaginary thought. Seth is saying that in these other systems, subjective associations are the laws of physics. They are the concrete structure. Association is like gravity there.
Give me an example of that. How does that work as a law of physics?
Okay, imagine walking into a library.
Okay.
The ego's way of organizing books is by the date they were published, or maybe the Dewey Decimal System. It's linear. It's logical to us.
Makes sense.
Now, imagine a library organized by the inner self, or the dream self. It organizes by emotional signature or association.
So not by topic.
No, let's say you have a cookbook. In the ego library, the book next to it is another cookbook. But in the dream library, the book next to it is a murder mystery.
Why?
Because the cookbook describes a hot oven, that evokes the sensation of heat. The murder mystery involves a smoking gun, that also evokes heat.
Oh, I see.
To the ego, seeing a cookbook next to a mystery novel looks like chaos. It looks random. Why is the chicken recipe next to the revolver?
But to the inner self.
To the inner self, there's a deep intuitive connection. Both books are bound together by the reality of heat. In a probable system, you travel via that connection. If you are standing in a kitchen in a dream and you suddenly feel a flash of heat that reminds you of a sunburn you got on a boat snap, you are instantly on the boat.
You didn't walk there, you associated there.
Exactly. You traveled along the line of subjective association. Seth talks about intuitive flashes of insight that combine elements that appear totally disconnected to the ego into whole integrated patterns.
So the chaos of dreams is really just us trying to read a map written in a language we don't speak. We're looking for street signs, but the landscape is built on feelings.
Ideally, yes. And because we don't understand it, we dismiss it as unreal. But Seth is completely adamant. Events in probable systems are objective and concrete within their own field, just as physical matter is in ours.
This actually makes the concept of sleep much more active. He mentions that sleep isn't a negative state.
Right, we tend to think of sleep as powering down the robot. You turn off the lights, the machine stops to recharge. Seth says sleep is an active withdrawal. You aren't just leaving the physical field, you are actively entering other fields of actuality. You're punching into a new shift at a different job, essentially.
It's kind of weird to think that I might have a whole other career or life in a probable system that I'm just amnesiac about when I wake up.
You almost certainly do. And that leads us to the second segment of the session, which I found honestly a little bit chilling. It's about the structure of the self.
Yeah, this is where the chilling vibe comes in for me, too.
Yeah.
It is a radical dismantling of who we think we are.
Seth starts talking about the ego. And he doesn't pull any punches. He describes the ego as well, kind of a narcissist. Or at least deeply insecure.
He says the ego is self-conscious. And because it's self-conscious, it attempts to be conscious only of itself. It draws a circle. Everything inside the circle is me. Everything outside is not me.
It's a defense mechanism. It creates boundaries to feel safe. But here's the kicker. Seth says, quote, each layer or each area of the whole self imagines that it is the center of awareness and that the whole self revolves about it.
Wait, so it's not just my ego that thinks it's the boss?
No, and this is the fascinating part. He introduces the subconscious as another self-conscious portion. Now, usually we think of the subconscious as this dark, murky basement where we store trauma, a passive storage bin.
Right. It's the place where I keep my childhood fears and my repressed anger.
Seth describes it almost like a neighbor or a disgruntled roommate.
A neighbor who knows you're there, but you don't know they're there.
Or rather, you ignore them. The subconscious looks at the ego and views it as an extension of itself, over which it does not have as much control as it would like.
Huh. That is hilarious. My subconscious is looking at me right now, looking at my ego, talking into this microphone and thinking, oh, look what he's doing now. I can't control this guy. He's going off script.
Exactly. The subconscious thinks it is the real you, and the ego is just this loud, clumsy puppet it has to deal with. And conversely, the ego looks at the subconscious as this unruly, shadowy thing that just sends up weird urges.
But they are both I.
They are both I. They just have different boundaries. Seth says the two selves, being self-conscious selves, cannot be aware of any reality but their own.
So we are essentially a duplex, or an apartment building where the tenants just refuse to speak to each other.
A high-rise, really. Seth hints that there are other layers above and below. He uses those terms loosely that we don't even know about yet. But the chilling realization is that we are a collection of eyes that don't talk to each other directly.
It really challenges the whole idea of the individual. I feel like one person. But according to this, I have a committee where the members are actively ignoring each other.
But there is hope. Seth mentions the whole self or the gestalt. There is a part of you that is aware of the unity, the goal of personality development, and really the goal of the Seth Material is for the whole self to become aware of all these fragmented parts, to get the committee to sit down at the same table.
Okay, so we've got this high-level cosmic geography, probable universes, fragmented selves, associative laws. Yeah. And then we get to the beer coaster.
Yes, the famous envelope experiment.
I just love this transition. We go from the architecture of the soul to, hey, Rob found a coaster at a dance hall.
It feels like a total non sequitur, doesn't it? But it's not. This experiment, the envelope experiment, is a direct demonstration of that subjective association law we just talked about in the dream segment.
So for context for you listening, Rob, Jane's husband, was testing Jane's ability to see objects without looking. He would seal things in envelopes.
Double envelopes, usually.
Yeah.
To prevent any chance of seeing through the paper.
Right. And for this session, session 235, the object was a beer coaster Rob had picked up at a dance hall the previous Saturday.
A heavy, absorbent cardboard coaster. Rob had actually peeled off the top layer so it wouldn't be too thick in the envelope. It had a design printed in red.
But here is where it gets messy. And I love this because it shows that psychic ability isn't like a clean 4K video feed. It's glitchy. It's messy.
It's highly symbolic and associative.
So Jane in trance, as Seth starts describing the object, but she's not describing a coaster. She's describing a shield.
Yeah, she says something that resembles a shield in shape, made of metal. An insignia.
She mentions 1888 and violets. And Rob is sitting there thinking, this is wrong. It's a beer coaster. We're failing the test.
But then Seth pauses and says, the object which we have dealt with is Monday's object.
The missing session.
Correct. Remember in the intro, we mentioned they skipped the session on Monday, February 21st. Rob had an object prepared for that day, a different experiment involving a doctor in stream, but they never did it.
So the psychic signal for Monday was still just floating around.
In a way, yes. This is what they call a bleed through. In the psychic state, time is fluid. Monday's target and Wednesday's target are just events sitting next to each other on the shelf. Jane reached out and grabbed the wrong one.
That is fascinating. It's like clicking the wrong file on a computer because the icons look similar.
And once they cleared that up, once Seth says, okay, that was Monday, let's look at today, the description of the coaster becomes very specific. But notice how it becomes specific.
Let's look at the hits. Seth says red color.
The print on the coaster was red. That's a direct visual hit.
Blunted edges.
Now this is interesting. The coaster itself is paper, but it depicted beer glasses. Seth says the edges would be sharp like glass, but are somewhat blunted. Jane felt this referred to the rims of the glasses. Smooth for drinking.
Wow. That's a very subtle perception. Not the object itself, the cardboard, but the nature of the thing depicted on the object.
Exactly. Yeah. Seth also mentions moving parts and clocks.
Which seems completely wrong for a coaster.
Until you realize the coaster had a design of 3 circles, the rims of the glasses. And later, Seth connects this to the concept of time via school bells. It's a chain of association again. Circles to clocks, to time to bells.
But the absolute peak of this session, the part that had me literally laughing out loud, is the hack rice incident.
Pure gold. Yeah. This is where the chilling vibe evaporates and we just get the absurdity of being human.
So Seth is trying to describe the coaster. And he says it connects to grassy land and apron strings.
And Rob is just baffled. It's a beer coaster. What does grass have to do with it?
And this is where we get to see the inner workings of how clairvoyance functions. It's a game of telephone played with symbols.
It really is. Seth explains the chain. He got the impression of grassy land. Why? Because grassy land implies grain.
Okay, grain makes beer. That makes sense.
But the mind didn't stop at beer. Grain led to rice.
Okay.
And rice led to a specific person Rob knows. Hack rice.
You cannot make this up.
You really can't. The psychic connection jumped from beer coaster to grain to rice to hack rice.
So tell us about hack rice. Who is this guy? Why did the psychic signal land on him of all things?
So Rob explains in his notes. Hack rice is a coworker, usually a quiet, smiling guy, keeps to himself, but a pleasant fellow. But on that Saturday night at the same dance hall where Rob got the coaster, Hack rice was there.
And he wasn't being quiet.
No. Apparently, Hack rice was having a very, very good time. He was dancing with a stranger, and Rob describes it as an exhibition of exaggerated, sinuous, close contact dancing.
So he was grinding.
He was absolutely grinding on the dance floor. And remember, this is the 1960s in Elmira, New York, so this was a major spectacle.
I just love that a profound psychic session channeled by a non-physical entity who understands the structure of the multiverse takes a detour to gossip about a coworker's drunken dancing.
Yeah, your obnoxiously pleasant rice, as Seth calls him, quote unquote.
That is a sick burn from a spirit guide. Obnoxiously pleasant.
But this is the crucial lesson. Why did Seth pick up on hack rice instead of just saying, it's a coaster?
Because of the emotion.
Yes. Seth explicitly says, quote, emotional elements are always perceived more easily. The geometry of the coaster is cold data. It has no feeling. But the memory of that night, the laughter, the shock of seeing quiet hack rice dancing like a maniac that is hot data, it glows in the psychic spectrum.
So clairvoyance isn't just seeing, it's feeling the atmosphere surrounding an object. The coaster was a magnet for the vibes of that Saturday night.
Precisely. The coaster recorded the event, and that explains the apron strings comment, too.
Right, what was that about again?
Rob's friend Marilyn was at the table that night. She had been telling a story about her son literally hanging on to her apron strings while she tried to do housework.
So the coaster absorbed that conversation too.
It absorbed the energy of the conversation, the frustration, the humor, the maternal bond. It all got stuck to the psychic resin of the coaster.
Makes you wonder what our objects are carrying right now. My coffee mug probably has a lot of anxiety attached to it.
Oh, very likely. Objects are not dead things in the Seth universe. They are nodes of connection.
There's also a really interesting bit about how Seth is training Jane. Rob asks, did you read my mind or did you see the coaster?
The classic telepathy versus clairvoyance debate.
And Seth says,
He says it was clairvoyance. He saw the object. Specifically, he saw the color red first.
again, because red is emotional.
Red is vibrant. It carries a frequency of intensity. Seth explains that he perceives the gestalt, the whole feeling of the object. But Jane Rubert, as Seth calls her, has to translate that feeling into physical words.
And that's where the struggle is.
Seth says, quote, Rubert does not deal with details as far as his overall perceptive patterns are concerned, and I'm teaching him to do so.
It's like Seth is the transmitter, sending a high-def signal, and Jane is an old antenna trying to tune it in. Seth has to play games to get her to the right data.
The numbers game is a great example of this. There were 6 people in their party that night. Seth wanted Jane to say the number 6.
But she started with 4.
Seth explains that he came in on the memory when there were 4 people, before the last couple arrived. And the number 4 was actually printed tiny on the coaster. So he used the 4 as a hook to lead her, counting up, to the 6.
It's so manipulative, but in a totally teaching way.
It's pedagogical. He's training her associations. Start here, feel this, now move to that. It demystifies the process. It's not magic, it's a skill of translation.
It's a learning process, Seth says. This merely involves my efforts to teach Rubert to focus more specifically.
And that humility is what makes the Seth material so compelling to me. Seth doesn't claim to be infallible in the transmission. He admits, I am learning the best ways of giving Rubert data.
It's a partnership, a collaboration between dimensions.
And it's messy. It involves misfired dates, confused symbols, and drunk coworkers. It's wonderfully human for a non-human source.
So where does this leave us? We've gone from the architecture of dreams to the dance floor of Elmira. We've talked about the ego being a flashlight in the dark room, and we've talked about hack rice grinding on a stranger.
I think the through line is connection.
How so?
In the dream segment, Seth tells us that everything is connected through subjective association. Feelings bind realities together. In the envelope experiment, we see that proven. The coaster is connected to the grain to the name rice, the name to the person to the dance to the emotion.
The universe isn't built of bricks. It's built of spider webs.
Exactly. Everything is touching everything else. The ego tries to cut those threads to say, I am me, and that is a coaster. But the inner self knows that the me and the coaster and hack rice are all tangled up in the exact same energetic event.
And realizing that is what wakes us up.
It's the first step to seeing the whole self, to broaden that flashlight beam until you see the entire warehouse.
This has been an incredible look into just one session, session 235. It's amazing how much is packed into these few pages.
And we didn't even touch on everything. The doctor and stream data itself, the Monday object, is a whole other rabbit hole we could go down.
Maybe for another deep dive.
Indeed.
So here's my final thought for you to chew on as you go about your day. Seth says, our dreams are glimpses of probable realities, real places, real events.
And our ego is just a flashlight beam in a massive dark room.
Exactly. So my question is this. If you are just the flashlight, what are you missing in the dark? And more importantly, what version of hack rice is dancing in the probable universe right next to this one? Is there a version of you dancing wildly in a universe you visit every night but forget every single morning?
Yeah, that is a thought worth sleeping on. Or perhaps traveling on.
If you want to explore these probable realities yourself and maybe figure out who is dancing in your dreams, go study the Seth Material books.
You can find them at the New Awareness Network website and bookstore at sethcenter.com/3 The Early Sessions.
Seriously, go check it out. As a reminder, this deep dive is distributed free of charge on all major platforms for educational purposes. We do this because we love it, and we want you to have the tools to dive deep yourselves.
Keep questioning, keep exploring.
And watch out for blunted edges.
Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll see you in the next probability.